So I asked you guys to give me your worst Assassin's Creed takes, and you did a really good job. So what does a worst take mean? That's a fair question. To me, it means something that you personally believe in, but you know is not popular. Like if you were to say that to a random person, they would be like, no. I asked you guys on Twitter, YouTube, and Discord, so we're gonna go through all of them and yeah, roast your worst takes. All right, we're here on the YouTube community, and Ashton Davis says the last two games should have been their own game and should have been called Odyssey or Valhalla, an Assassin's Creed story. So I'm not a big fan of the title is the problem because I don't think it's actually the issue. I don't think anyone really cares about what the title of these games are. I mean, I guess it's a good distinction, but at the end of the day, I think it's more of a symptom of a larger issue. Although I wouldn't call this like a worst take because I think a lot of people think this, even though it doesn't make sense to me. Carabiner Ked says they should have continued to refine Unity and made the next game a functioning version of the groundwork that Unity had, and the series would be better for it. This is a worst take that I really do agree with. I think you guys know, at least from my ranking video, like Unity I felt was a really legitimate groundwork for what Assassin's Creed could have continued to be. It really did feel like that next version of a formula that we really liked and kind of pushed it into a modern flavor that I feel like was appealing to a lot of people. Obviously, it didn't work out, and so rewriting history isn't really something that's realistic or productive. So to say that they should have refined Unity, I don't know, because Unity was such a colossal failure that it really lost Ubisoft a lot of goodwill. Even if they put out Unity 2, I think it would have really hurt them. Aiden says focus more on the modern day. It would be awesome to see more of the modern day Brotherhood, maybe even have the modern day function as another region or its own game entirely. Again, this isn't really a worst take, but I will say I love this idea. I think that modern day is one way or the other. You get rid of it and you stop talking about it and you ignore it and move on, or you actually care about it. What you're doing inside of the Animus affects what's happening outside of the Animus. Not this, cryptic sort of thing that barely appears and doesn't actually matter until the final cutscene of the game, and even by that point, only your biggest fans really care about what that is and what's happening. It needs more focus, or just stop. Furzy says, forget setting and story, we need parkour back. We spend more time on our horse than actually going roof to roof. It's the soul of the game. This isn't a hot take, and it's absolutely correct in my book. I know the soul of a game can change, so it's not that change is bad, and it's, not bad because it's not how it used to be. However, I mean, jumping from rooftop to rooftop, you can boot up the old games and immediately feel how fun that is. It's not some secret, right? I mean, if you are someone that enjoys the older experience like me, there is something missing in the newer games where it's not particularly fun to parkour with the system they gave us, and at the same time, you're not doing it nearly as much as we could be doing. And it is because of the format, and, they decided to go in that direction, the open world Witcher 3 style thing, which is, what they decided to do. But I think it's totally fair to look back and say, okay, this just isn't as engaging as it was. At this point, this is not me reading hot takes, it's just opinions, so it's fine. Nezuyui Koi says, I think that they made a mistake with launching Rogue and Unity at the same time. Rogue is a really good game, but Unity launching with it took away interest from Rogue. So if they launch Rogue first, people will give it the popularity it deserves, and Unity wouldn't be a buggy mess. I think there's definitely some truth to this. It would make a lot of sense if they did that. And Rogue didn't get as much time in the limelight as it did, deserve. Makes some really good points here. Honestly, I do think that Rogue got done dirty because of the development cycle. So if in this alternate history version, you gave Rogue more time to be a more fleshed out game and also gave it its own spotlight and pushed Unity off another year, that hypothetically could have solved a lot of problems. I don't love hypothetical history, but this makes sense. Caleb says Ezio's whole arc that allegedly takes place over 3 games is actually pretty much resolved by the end of his first game. People act like he slowly progressed, but he reaches the end of his wisdom by the end of AC2. He's already a mentor. He's just getting older. Doesn't learn anything except for revelations. No. No, I do think that what we see from Ezio in the trilogy, which is extremely popular, and I know people have a lot of nostalgia for it, including myself, I do think that Ezio grows through experiences. And sort of, people don't realize, or at least it's easy to forget, that AC2 spans over a very long time. So I think it's very fair to say that he does learn a lot in Assassin's Creed 2 and does have a lot of growth. But then Brotherhood and Revelations aren't necessarily that same game, that same experience. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that he doesn't grow. Brotherhood is a one-city game about taking down a very specific target. It's more defined in that way. And it also expands on the fantasy of Ezio being a master assassin, being able to call in the Brotherhood. I mean, just those ceremony scenes alone of Ezio sort of, initiating the Brotherhood members. I mean, that is so pivotal for my view of Ezio. And then going into Revelations, you actually get to mentor young assassins and see them progress from just recruits to masters themselves. That's gameplay stuff, right? And I know Caleb talked about the story, but there are, I'm blanking on the specific plot details, but I just feel like there's enough going on with both of those games, especially Revelations, which really, really, really explores Ezio in a more mature and very interesting light, in my opinion. The Kiwi Gamer says, we need the old combat system back. Sure, it's simple, but I still find it more fun to play than the current AC game. Valhalla's combat feels lackluster and stiff. Odyssey and Origins somehow felt nicer to play than Valhalla, but I still want the old combat back. This is a spicy take, and I really like it because I agree. Mechanically, it's a lot more simple. That's what Kiwi says here. That's true, but it is far less satisfying to me. One of the quotes that I go back to is actually from Ghost of Tsushima. Fantastic game. If you haven't played it, a lot of people are like, this is the real Assassin's Creed. I'm like, no, they're different. But the people who made that, Sucker Punch, they talked about honoring the lethality of the blade. And that quote has stuck with me ever since I heard it. And I've applied that to Assassin's Creed. And this is not the one-shot hidden blade argument. It is every weapon. Honor the lethality of every weapon. Now, it's not true to say that, the older games used to be more realistic with combat outside of the hidden blade, because they did have health bars and it did take a long time to whack through them. But the weapons in the old games feel more like weapons. When you start getting into the RPG games, they don't feel brutal to me. They don't feel weighty, and they don't feel like they used to feel. There used to be a rhythm. There used to be a dance with combat. And those cutscenes that would draw you in, I'm talking about Brotherhood and Revelations, and even Syndicate had some awesome ones, but Assassin's Creed 3 had amazing combat animations that would trigger in specific scenarios. Stuff like that, sure, it's pausing and watching a cutscene. It's sort of an old way of doing things, but it really seals home that these assassins are brutal and deadly. It's the power fantasy. And that's one of the reasons why I give Brotherhood my favorite Assassin's Creed game award, right? Because you feel like an absolute badass at the absolute height of Ezio's killing ability. And that is what I love. And so it's way more about what's happening on a mechanical level for me. Esiocles says Black Flag has the worst mission structure out of all the OGs except the first game. I say that because Black Flag's over-reliance on tailing missions. No other game in the franchise has this many. I still love the game though. So you love the game, and I appreciate that because I love Black Flag too. I think my hottest Assassin's Creed take probably is that I love tailing missions. I love tailing missions. Donkey made a video like 10 years ago now talking about why Assassin's Creed sucks in general, and one of his main points was tailing missions suck and they're boring. And if you've got goopy goblin gamer brain and you just want to be in the action, yes, they are very boring. But if you take a step back and you want to be part of this assassin fantasy, one of the most assassin-y things I can think of is being like a spy and skulking around on a rooftop or behind corners and eavesdropping. And they even made it interesting by having to stay in a range and moving from bushes to bushes to bushes. Look, I really like tailing missions, and I wish they would come back. I really, really do. All right, switching over to Twitter now. We've got a lot of good stuff. Cow Josh Bebop has 3, and I like all of them. First off, modern day, if it exists, should be a fun, playable area, not a series of hacking mini games. Agreed. Modern day used to be playable space, used to be playable areas. I mean, you can hop off, you know, as Layla, you can get out of the Animus, you can walk around, but it's almost like a hub space where you really can't do much. There's like some Easter eggy things, but if they had like some kind of telemetry, Ubisoft collected data to see how often people jumped out of the Animus, I swear to you, less than 5% of people hop out of the Animus more than once through a playthrough. Like, there is no freaking way that people care. Because they are not given reasons to care. So yeah, I think it would be awesome if it was a fun, playable area. Kind of like we had in, gosh, was it Brotherhood? Brotherhood, you could get out and walk around this big, you know, like city. I think it was modern day Monteriggioni. Yeah. That is really, really cool. You couldn't do a lot of stuff in there. I think there were like some puzzles and things, but something like that I think needs to make a comeback if they're going to do it. Syndicate is the best Assassin's Creed game with its brutal combat, switchable characters, and a great location. No, it's not. I'm just kidding. Obviously, best game is just hugely about your personal preferences, so I'm not going to dog Josh here about his favorite game. Honestly, I think if you started with Syndicate, that was your first Assassin's Creed exposure, and you were like, hell yeah, this is sick, then I could absolutely see Syndicate being your best Assassin's Creed game. Fine. As someone who started with 1, though, no. And then Josh says, choosing the gender of the main character makes no sense in the AC mythos. No, it does not. However, they stopped caring about the AC mythos a long time ago. It stopped being about, you know, the bloodline. It stopped being about generational, gosh, this guy who made a really long critique video kept repeating this phrase and I've forgotten it by now. It used to matter that Desmond's blood extended all the way back to the assassins, to Ezio and Altair, right? And Connor as well. That stopped mattering after Desmond. That was sort of the connective thread, I think, a really big reason why modern day and, you know, the Animus stuff, why that actually worked. So to separate those two, for people that care about it, yeah, it has nothing to do with being able to choose genders and, you know, catering to as large an audience as possible and having that be an option. I think that is something that modern gamers kind of expect and probably appreciate. But when you are looking at it from that perspective, sure, it doesn't really make sense for Assassin's Creed. Troy, hello, Troy. Troy says Assassin's Creed has had fantasy aspects to its games, and the newest games are just building on top of that, and I don't see it as a problem the way most fans are these days. So for me on this one, I don't think it's the same. Assassin's Creed has always had fantasy, but it used to be more sci-fi fantasy, if that makes sense. It used to be about mystery and intrigue and sort of conspiracy, right? You know, the apples of Eden were this ancient technology created by this ancient race, which in and of itself is very fantastical. But what the newer games are doing is a completely different style to me. So that is why it's such an offensive sort of like switch. It's jarring for some people, and it's almost like a different genre. And that's why a lot of people say these are not Assassin's Creed games line over and over until their throats bleed. So yeah, it's totally fine to not see it as a problem, but I just don't like see the direct line there personally. I don't think it's necessarily just building off of what was there. I think it's reformulating those ideas into something new. Let's Talk Assassin's Creed says, I don't enjoy parkour. I'm just disappointed. Silence Apologist says, I love Valhalla, and then this emoji. It's okay to love Valhalla. It really is. I don't love it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. And you know what? That's not even a hot take, I don't think. I think a lot of people love Valhalla. They may not watch this channel just because of my opinions, but yeah. Protect Baby Sif, hello, says, Valhalla is a top 5 AC game. It may be broken technically and not all of its parts flow together, but the storytelling and lore in that game healed my soul after years of garbage from this franchise, and I will always appreciate it for that. You know, someone else said something like this on my Valhalla's Ultimately Disappointed Me video, and here's how I look at it. I did not appreciate almost any of the storytelling or lore that was put in there and sort of designed to reel in old school fans. And I think the reason I didn't appreciate it, and I still don't, is because of the rest of the experience. I think it's great that you're hearkening back to older days in Valhalla, and speaking to older fans who will appreciate something that calls back to what they loved before. However, it doesn't feel super genuine when so much of the game doesn't, harken back to the older days. I mean, talk about the stealth systems in Valhalla and no social stealth. Like, so much doesn't honor what came before. And for me, that it makes it feel less genuine. And I think my biggest beef on that front is that it was sold as being as a whole, a return to what was good. And it just was not, for me. Aaron says, the rope launcher in Syndicate was fun and I felt like Batman. I agree. I mean, you could say it's Assassin's Creed in some ways by utilizing like technology made by an expert of the day, whatever. It also undercuts a lot of the typical way that you explore environments in Assassin's Creed games. But there was a really cool flow that you could find where you could match that rope launcher gameplay with parkour and sort of like mix them each in. And yes, it does make you feel like Batman. And yes, it does sort of promote some of the assassin-y, skulking, sort of stealthy gameplay. So I really ended up liking the rope launcher when I replayed Syndicate last year in a way that I thought I would not. Marco D, or Marcod, says, Brotherhood sucks, and it's very overrated. Its story is bland, gameplay basically the same as 2, and Rome is way too similar to Firenze. You've offended me greatly. It's hard to talk about like what's actually overrated and what's, underrated, because literally everyone has their own perceptions of everything. Like, one of the most common comments I get these days is on my Assassin's Creed 3 Is It Really That Bad video. People are like, bro, who thought this game was bad? I'm like, me. I didn't think it was bad personally, but like from my perception, looking around the room, for years, I would see people say that Assassin's Creed 3 was bad. And that was from the lens of someone who played the games before, because they were like, 3 is way too different and Connor is nothing like Ezio, and on and on and on. Now we look back at it fondly, right? But back to Brotherhood. I see Brotherhood as just like a very keen refinement on 2. I see Brotherhood as taking the power fantasy that you achieve at the end of 2 and stretching it over an entire game and just making the absolute, like, distilling what the Ezio Assassin's Creed games could be down to their very essence. Ratcheting up the combat with this insane counter kill system that you can chain, and also condensing it down to one single city so it feels more focused. I see those as pluses on every single level. So yeah, you're wrong. No, I'm just kidding. All right, guys, that's it for me. That's me roasting your bad takes, more just like talking about them. I really wasn't roasting. Some of them were bad. Some of them were bad. But let me know what you think. I'm feeling like appearing on camera more. So if you like this kind of style, let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed, click that like button. Also subscribe so you don't miss my next video, and click the bell so you get a notification whenever I upload. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you very soon.